Good morning and welcome to Community Conversations. I'm Vicki Green. Today we have a story about an issue that faces so many communities in Massachusetts and around the country. It's been in the news most recently when reports came out of the charges facing Patriots owner Robert Kraft and the massage parlor issues. Today we're going to talk about sex trafficking and prostitution. Are they different? If so, why or why not? Here to discuss some of the amazing work being done here in Central Mass to help women get out of horrific and sometimes fatal situations are two people from a relatively new organization in Central Massachusetts called LIFT. It stands for Living in Freedom Together, and that's Karen Riley McNary, who's Director of Programs for LIFT. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
And Michelle Gaspar, who's Director of Jana's Place, which we will discuss in a moment. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning.
And you are a survivor yourself, correct?
I am, yes.
And we are going to talk about that. So Karen, LIFT was founded in 2014, incorporated in 2016, so it's around 5 years, and founded by a survivor of prostitution, Nikki Bell. And Nikki has spoken nationally, regionally, locally. She was on the street for 10 years. It's a very important mission of this organization, is it not, that survivors be involved in this organization?
Absolutely. It's I think the most important thing within this organization is that we have survivors leading other survivors into an exit strategy if that's what they're looking for, and support in rebuilding a life outside of commercial sexual exploitation.
And it's interesting you use that term. We were talking before the show. You hear words like hooker, even prostitute. Mm-hmm. Can you use the word prostitute? Because we use prostitution. What is the term that's used? Is it they are commercially, sexually exploited?
I think there is a lot of language out there, talking about commercial sexual exploitation or the buying of another human for sex, essentially. And so, I think that when we talk about prostitution as it's commonly known, we want to be honoring, the survivors that are out there. We want to talk about something that is happening, to them, not something that they're willingly, engaging in. And I think we'll talk about that in a little bit.
We
that
will.
can be
whether
a
it's a
confusing.
choice,
Yes. The issue of choice. And we want to make sure that we are talking about what is really going on out there. And that's usually things that are happening to people versus things that they're opting in for.
Yeah, and Michelle can get to that, I'm sure, with her own story. And Nikki does. And it's amazing if you read her story. And she's been national news, local news. Well, she was called by every press reporter I heard when this Robert Kraft thing broke locally in Massachusetts to get her take on it. Because you see so much in the media of Pretty Woman, the movie, or now in the news it's spas and it's Asian women. Well, it's much more than that. So I want to read a quote from Nikki that I got to start this. And she said, quote, "I want to end the exploitation of vulnerable girls, women, and people who are trapped in the commercial sex industry, regardless of whether they are victims of trafficking, because we will never have gender equality if any woman or girl is for sale." And I think that's very powerful. So can you explain LIFT's programs and some of the services, and then we'll get to Michelle and get to what Jana's Place is all about?
Sure, absolutely. So LIFT does go back to 2014, a little bit before that even. And it really was Nikki herself needing, a support of other women who have had shared similar experiences. So kind of with a pot of coffee and what she could pull out of her closet and the closets of a few other people, she set out to create a support group. And from that support group, this is what, has grown, which is the need for significant exit strategy for people.
Exit meaning getting out
of the life. Yep. So exit strategies having to do with, whether or not we are working with people around criminal histories that were, sort of associated with, with their time, sort of in the life. Exit strategy when it comes to a safe place, to live. We have a drop-in center that we run currently right now as we're working on Jana's Place. We're only open, a few hours a week. We're open Tuesday mornings from 9 until noon with medical care on site oftentimes.
I read about that, Community Health Link.
Yes, Dr. Jennifer Bradford comes in and she offers, just a little bit of consultation on site And then for anything she can't manage, in that location, she's actually setting appointments for individuals.
And people
to
may
come
be
see
saying
her.
why, and you have to think about it.
Yeah.
STDs
STDs.
and all sorts of gynecological issues.
Sure, but it's a simple also for people that are actually on the street and living on the street. They walk miles and hours per day. This could just simply be like a full foot blister that has become infected. They may have injection site wounds or injection site infections. They may just, what we would take care of in pink eye can really rage out of control.
Right, they have no health insurance. They have nothing.
Well, you also don't have access to hygiene. So, where we can clean and disinfect and apply, antibiotics and the rest of that, oftentimes, the people that we see don't have access to even those.
So we can't give an address out for that either, but that's
We
right.
don't. And they can, you can access that through, our phone number.
The website, too,
the
will be
website-
it's very easy, liveworcester.org.
Give us a call. We can figure it out via that. We can also, with this word of mouth. Most people that are in need of our services know who we are and where to find us. And for those that don't, they can give us a call.
And the word probably spreads. I mean,
Absolutely.
Michelle, I'm going to go to you for a second because we're going to talk about John's Place, but you're a survivor. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you got out?
Sure. So essentially, I started, using substances when I was about 12 years old. I had gone through some, early abuse as a child, and my life just kind of went downhill after that, and I was just looking for a way to feel other than I felt for myself. I wanted to do something that was going to take me out of myself, and that led to using substances, being in a lot of unhealthy relationships. And I was at a point in my life where I was in a relationship that was very unhealthy, and just kind of came across somebody that offered me a friendship that essentially turned into him exploiting me.
Right. In other words, you go hang out with my friend and they're going to give us $100 or whatever it is. Because that's a pretty common way people get into that too, right? I mean, I read a lot about that, and that's a pretty common way. And kudos to you for getting out of it.
Thank you.
Because I'm sure I've read about people that have been in it for way longer than that until eventually they could die or be killed or for whatever reason.
And I mean, when I did get out, actually, I had come from Boston to Worcester just actually to get sober from substances. And this was something that I was not willing to talk about. I did not want to share this story with anybody because I was very ashamed and embarrassed.
You mean the non-drug part of it?
The non-drug
So
part
it's
of it.
interesting. You weren't
Yes.
really afraid to say I'm recovering from drugs,
Right.
but I don't want anyone to know that I sold myself, that I was for sale.
Yes, because you kind of take that on as a responsibility of yourself, like you did that. But until I learned, I was a victim in all of that. And just by sharing that with other women, they can also realize that they are a victim and they're not, making that choice. And instead of staying behind the shame and the guilt, that will keep you in it for a long time.
How did you meet? Did you meet Nikki?
I did, yes. Yes.
When you were involved, and that's how you got involved in Lyft?
I wasn't involved. I was actually already out of the life. And I met Nikki when she was actually coming out of the life herself.
She was in jail for 10 years, right?
Not for 10 years.
On and off.
On and off.
On and off,
Yes,
okay.
on and off.
Which is obviously not uncommon. We know that.
Right. But no, we actually met at a peer recovery center here
Oh.
in Worcester. And she was, coming out of the life and just really needing that support from, what goes on, what we go through during those times, and rounding up women that she knew from being out and kind of just rallying around everybody and wanting to be support for everybody.
Do people go out from Lyft and go actually, either one of you can answer this, go out to some of the places locally that people hang out, that transactions are made? Do you do that?
Sure.
Karen, you can-
Sure. We do go out on occasion. Oftentimes we're actually going out for a purpose. We're looking for someone, haven't seen them in a minute, want to talk, to them, see that they're good. And if we haven't seen them and we haven't heard about them, we might just check up. But there are times, where we just go out, just to see how people are doing. Part of that is that there is a really fresh supply coming into Worcester all the time. It's something that we are hearing from people is that they're seeing, new people out, out on the sort of that Main South Millbury Street stretch.
Now you bring up that interesting comment because we were talking before the show about where we grew up. And you and I grew up in suburban Boston, Metro West. And people don't know that it's not just happening in urban areas. Lyft is doing a wonderful job in Central Mass. But we have people, what would you say to people listening right now? I mean, we know where we grew up in Metro West cities and towns and fairly wealthy suburbs. Sure. That doesn't mean it's not going on there, correct?
Oh, that absolutely doesn't mean it's not going on there. Certainly the largest group of prostituted people are coming out of, of our foster care systems. They're coming out of state care. They're aging out and into the systems.
Which is 22, right?
Yeah, or vulnerabilities of being in group homes and being recruited out of those spaces. Again, high vulnerability, but it absolutely happens in our rural communities. Indeed, those are really, those are hardcore spaces for particularly traffickers to engage, to engage others into the life from.
So I think everyone would agree that, the media often portrays this like the Pretty Woman movie I mentioned.
Yes.
She comes out of the life because she meets this wonderful guy and it turns out to be this wonderful thing. And, the Robert Kraft thing, for better for worse, at least, and the Me Too movement has brought this issue more to light. I know that there was a human trafficking law legislation passed in Massachusetts in 2012. Is there a difference between trafficking and prostitution?
That's a lot of semantics. That really is.
That's
a lot
where
of
I get
semantics.
confused. To be honest with you,
people.
We are buying people,
right?
But are they being? It's not a choice. Is the point?
It's not a choice.
People are coming out of, like Michelle said, she came out of abusive home relationship. They find themselves without housing for whatever reason. But and I've heard Nikki, I've read her say this a million times and seen it and thought about it. It's not just the girls like saying, I'm in college and I can't afford tuition, so I'm going to go dance at the club. And, it's not great. It's not, I wouldn't recommend everyone doing it, but I just need money for tuition, then I'll go back to school. That's not the norm.
Well, Vicki, part of what that does for our communities is it allows us to not take responsibility for what's going on our streets, actually. If we can look at that and we can say, oh, this is heavy choice by someone who is privileged enough to be studying at a university and can't quite afford their books, and it's something that they're doing anyways, might as well get paid for it. All of this sounds very familiar to us, but it's not what it actually, looks like. I think that if we were very honest, we could say that maybe a few, a very, very, very small percentage, maybe. It's a giant maybe on that. But the vast numbers are people who have found themselves with a challenge of some kind, whether that's a trauma that they are looking to, heal from in all the wrong ways. Whether that is, something that they're doing out of in a relationship for love. And, and I think that's probably where,
people think they're like
so
Michelle
vulnerable,
said. Right. And I never thought of that. You think you're in a relationship and then all of a sudden it's somebody who you gains your trust.
Gains your trust.
And then says.
And exploits you.
I can make money off of this.
Right. So, in terms of definition, we think about trafficking as that there is somebody else that is, that is forcing you into, being prostituted. And being prostituted seems to be something that we do individually, but it is semantics. We are talking about the buying and selling of another human being for sex and sex acts.
And I think, too, that's where I was confused until I read all this, because I'm saying, well, what law would cover, you read quite often about, especially in Worcester, even last week, you read about these stings that happen and they pick up the Johns. But what was interesting was I said it to Michelle. I said, hey, I saw this article last week, and here I am looking. I want to know where they're from and what their ages are, the men. I'm just curious. right? And the fact that they're picking up the men, because if it's supply and demand, if the demand goes down, they pick up these men. But then you said, well, guess what? Only 6 of those 16 were men. And I went back and I read it. I said, you're right. So the other 10 were women who got arrested. Explain the difference between what happens local, and all we can speak from is local experience here in this area. But I guarantee you it's probably happening in other areas, cities, towns, counties. What happens to the male Johns when they get picked up in the act versus the women?
So essentially, so in that arrest, so 16 people were arrested. Like you said, 10 were women, 6 were men. The men were brought and booked, and they were out within an hour or two. The 10 women were held, and they were held the whole weekend. So even
under what charge? Like, what's the difference? And do you know? I mean, I know you're not a lawyer, but
for sex for a fee.
So they get charged for that, but the John doesn't get charged for that?
So,
Go ahead.
so they do get charged with that. They're given a choice as to whether or not they want to, if they want to take part in what's called the CARD program here in Worcester. It's a half-day event or class that is run by Maureen Casey at Spectrum.
For the men.
For the men. And that it really is an empathy class. That's what the design of the course is for men to understand that they are buying a person, that the person has feelings, that that this is incredibly traumatizing and damaging to them. They're trying to debunk all of the myths that we're talking about here right now today.
How effective would Maureen say it is? I haven't talked to her about it.
You know what? I don't think I can answer that for her.
I mean, I guess it would
Maureen,
be
and I know
looking
that
at the men and how many times they're repeat offenders, I guess is my question. Does it do anything?
I don't think we actually are out there arresting buyers in the numbers that it would take to discover whether or not they're repeat offenders. What we know, because we can see them, and indeed they even call us.
The Johns?
Yeah, the buyers. They will call.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
They call an advocacy group for the women?
Absolutely. But they are oftentimes posing as, as single men who are stepping in to help this individual who is in distress. And indeed they're going to help this person kind of save their life.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
They call your organization an advocacy education
Absolutely.
for survivors of sexual exploitation. They are Johns.
Yep. I've heard
Oh my
I've heard
gosh.
so and so has gone into a detox or treatment program. Can I just want to send along a message. I heard so and so got picked up. I want to go, how do I help? I want to go in and bail them out. So buyers, will bail out in order to perpetuate the violence that they are inflicting upon these, individuals who are some of the most vulnerable within our communities. Period, hands down.
I had no idea about that. We didn't even talk about that. So we talked about the myth of, is it a choice? And obviously what we're saying is no.
Right. No, it's definitely not a choice. Whether a person loses that choice as a child essentially, whether they're experience any kind of physical, sexual, mental abuse growing up, whether or not they get a substance use disorder and all of the above, that choice is taken away. And I think we did talk about it earlier too. We say nobody wants to grow up and, be a prostituted woman. And when we talk about all this, like, people glamorize it with the dancing and the pretty woman and things like that, but nobody's actually talking about the violence, the beatings, the rape, the things that go on a daily basis. They do not look at the women as victims, and that's what they are. They're victims.
And I think you're right. I think people listening, I guess part of what LIFT does is educate. And I think that's why I wanted to do this show with you, is because I'd read about Jana's Place, which is going to be opening hopefully by the end of the summer.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about that because it's sorely needed. But I look at this show as a way to educate, because even the things that I'm hearing now, somebody who's researched this topic, I'm hoping people listening will really think about it. And you may say, well, that doesn't affect me in my community. Or, yeah, I read that in the news, or I saw that on TV. But the truth is, there was a piece on Channel 5 where one of the photographers was going to cover the story, and a girl Michelle, you said they're not always in fishnet stockings. They could be in like, an Abercrombie sweatshirt and jeans and look like your average girl came up to the photographer in the door window and kind of propositioned him. And they were there to do the story. And then they also talked in the story about how these people may be coming out of Lawrence, but they're being, these acts are happening in hotels in Natick, Framingham. So the point is just because you might see just because you don't see someone on the street doesn't mean, right, that it's not happening. And that's what you need to do: educate, work with law enforcement, work with people. And I'm hoping that my hope in doing this is that people listening that are like myself, maybe I'm a mother, I'm an aunt, I'm a sister, will say, I want my children and my nieces and nephews and family members to understand this. So much like homelessness used to be, if you see someone on the street, you can't pretend to understand their story. And just because you might have seen the movie Pretty Woman doesn't mean that these are bad, and these aren't necessarily bad people. They had bad luck, were put in bad situations, and it's often like an addiction. It's caused by addiction, and there's ways to get help, and treat the men in your lives and the boys in your lives. And I'm speaking to listeners now who may have sons and grandsons, and again, it's like the Me Too movement. Treat women with respect, and they're going to role play. They're going to follow your lead. So if anybody's listening, I think it's really important that we don't objectify these women. And that and what you're saying is a lot of what you do is try to get these Johns, get rid of the demand so that the woman wouldn't be there. And the women that are there, you're trying to now give them a choice to get out.
Right. And Nikki says this a lot too. And you talk about being a mom and a sister, and I'm a mom myself. But this isn't just a woman's issue. This is education all around. It's actually, like Nikki says, it's a man issue, right? Because without men, without buyers, we wouldn't have the supply. So I would say, we're not only educating our daughters, our sisters, our friends, we're educating boys to grow up and treat people with respect, treat women with respect, that that they're not objects or things, that, we're human.
Mm-hmm. And it may not be the people you think it is. It may not be an Asian spa. I think, it's well beyond that. So let's talk about Jana's Place while we finish up. Jana's Place is going to open, and you tell me it's a 15-bed residential home.
Yes.
Walk us through that. And in the fact, sorry to interrupt you, but this was amazing to me, because anybody who's ever been involved in the political system, this just speaks to the hard work of legislators in Central Mass that helped put this through. But the Department of Public Health, the State Department of Public Health, is paying for residential services for 15 beds.
Yes.
So 15 of these women don't have to worry about the cost.
Right.
People don't. That is amazing.
It is.
And granted, it's 15 beds, and I think we need probably 50 or more. But let's talk about what Jana's Place is going to be all about.
Yeah. So we it's super exciting. We received a 9-year sustainable contract through the state, and it's like you said, 15-bed program.
They're going to pay for 9 years.
It is a 9-year.
Well, they have to re-up it with the budget, yeah. But still, that's
a 9-year.
Wow.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
And this is a home for commercially, sexually exploited and prostituted women, and it's a way, hopefully, for anyone that is looking to exit the life. And it's a survivor-led organization. Karen and I, we say survivor-led, survivor-fed. We would like the majority of women and workers to, have experience. And, we're going to have, substance use disorder, co-occurring mental health issues. And
so will there be psychologists, not just beds, obviously there's going to be a kitchen and meals. And
oh, yes.
then what about these people that have kids? People forget that these women on the streets have kids.
Yeah, well, we're hoping, with Jana's Place, 2 of those beds will be reserved for pregnant and postpartum and reunification.
Pregnant women.
Yes, 2 of those beds. And we're hoping, that we can work with DCF, and our house will be a home where we can have reunification visits.
With their kids.
With their children, yes. And families. It's not, and we always say, reunification with children, and it's not always young children. It could be adult children. It could be a family member, a mother, a sister, a husband.
But it's a safe place where you're gonna have food, you'll have clothing, you'll have supplies. They can clean up, and you're smiling, Karen.
I think this is where I get very excited
Yeah.
about this, because it's not just a safe place for people to come and, sort of lay their head where they don't need to worry about people, kind of touching them, groping them in ways, which is actually what it is like to sleep outside, for women. But as some place that they can come and make choices for the future. If they are exploring language, English language learners doing ISET work, whether they're doing, some work-related experience, so that they're job ready, they are exploring, food for health and, book groups, crafts. They can learn how to knit. They can learn how to photograph. They can maybe do some coding. They definitely can do some like therapeutic body work and some clinical work on top of that. So this is a well-rounded program that is looking to kind of put out as much option and opportunity as we can for people to embrace healing in terms of what that looks like for them. Job readiness looks like something very different for women who particularly have a criminal history record.
I didn't even think of that. Going for a job, they're going to run a query.
They're going to run a query, and and it looks very different. Like, we can sit down and say, oh, what, I've struggled with substance use in my lifetime, and I have sort of sought treatment for that, and I've gotten beyond it. But that, sexual conduct for a fee, common night walker, common, street walker, those are charges that mean something completely different and offer. It's not an offering, but really puts up a tremendous barrier for individuals seeking to exit the life. That's the important piece of survivor-led, is that people can say, oh yeah, I've seen, like, all of these individuals over here have exited and, and chosen, a different path, and are succeeding and being taken seriously.
And they have to make money. Show them that you can make money without selling. Because you always, again, I see this, and I don't know somebody who dances, so I'm talking strictly from media base.
Okay.
You see them making a good amount of money that's very hard to make sometimes if you're an administrative assistant, or you work at a convenience store, or you work at minimum wage, let's say. So they may say, well, wait, I can make more money on the street. So how do you convince them that, getting out of the life
there's no convincing needed. This is not dancing's not fun. This is not fun. This isn't anything that anybody is interested, and therein lies that sort of fairy tale that we forget what is actually happening. I want to go back to the fact that this is not happening to them, with respect. And I don't remember who said this, but someone had mentioned, it was a quote of one of the national players in this work that was saying, imagine, you have sex with your partner. Well, imagine having sex with your partner 20 or 30 times per day.
20 or 30 times a day.
A day. And, and again, the majority of that money is not necessarily staying with them. So it's not even lucrative. We're talking about basic needs. I want some food. I want a place to stay tonight. If there is substance use disorder, and oftentimes there is that are involved in that, then we're just trying to stay well. We're just trying to, not be sick.
So going back to John's place for a second, if people want to help, they want to donate, they want to volunteer, they're not necessarily survivors.
Okay.
If they want to help, they can go to your website, which we're going to put on our website.
Yep.
Right?
Perfect.
Liftworcester.org. It couldn't be any easier. And this has just been, it's an extremely powerful thing. And I can't wait till John's place. It's on, what's the schedule now for maybe opening?
Well, we're hoping for the end of the summer. We don't have an exact date yet, but hopefully the end of the summer.
Yeah, because we need, in my opinion, and yours, we've talked about, we need more. This is a start, and it's great. So let's make it a pilot and show that it works. And, I mean, is this being done anywhere else? Is there any other residential, like in Lawrence or Lowell or New Bedford or some other Brockton places you might think of that are gateway cities?
So this is going to be the first program of its kind in the nation.
In the nation?
In the nation,
There's
yes.
no other residential home for women that have been on the street?
Not like ours.
That's survivor-led.
I think there are, certainly there is the Eva Center in Boston with Sherry Jimenez. I have heard rumblings out in Hampden County, so towards
Which is Springfield, yep.
But I think that, that for the co-occurring enhanced, program that we're opening, specifically
Access
for
to medical
prostituting
care,
Yep.
on-site.
everything.
medical care.
On site.
I know, and I want to. We're going to end here. Have to go in a minute, but we could talk for hours on this subject. LiftWorcester.org. If anybody has questions, they know someone in life that wants to get out. They want to know how they can. They're a teacher, and they want to know how to educate their kids. They're a school counselor, and they want to know if it should be added to the curriculum or how do you talk about it in health class. Is there a way to get that into the kids? But to end on a positive note, because I believe it's a tough issue that has to be discussed. I started with a quote from Lyft CEO Nikki Bell, who hopefully will listen to this after this incredible discussion. I'll meet her at some point. She's a survivor herself, like Michelle here. This was published several months ago in the Foxborough newspaper of Massachusetts prior to a big forum they were having on the issue. She said, I can remember being out in the streets and looking in people's windows, seeing them sit down and having dinner with their family and being like, why can't I have that? And I do have that today. And that's from Nikki Bell, who was herself on the streets and now has a wonderful, exciting life impacting many, many people, as you are and my guests in studio today. So with that, I want to thank our guests. Michelle Gaspar sitting here, director of John's Place, also a survivor. Kudos to you. Big kudos. And kudos to Karen Riley McNary, director of programs for Lyft. That's Living in Freedom Together. Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you for having
discussion.
us.
That's Community Conversations. Keep it going. I'm Vicki Green. Have a wonderful day.